I'll never forget the day I won the lottery. It was a Tuesday, gray and drizzly, the kind of day that makes you want to stay inside with a cup of coffee and a good book. I'd stopped at the corner store on my way home from work, same as always, to grab a gallon of milk. The clerk, old Mr. Hensley, grinned at me over his wire-rimmed glasses. "Why not buy a ticket, Jack?" he said, nodding at the flashing lotto sign. "Someone's gotta win it." I laughed. "Yeah, sure, someone. Never me." But I had a couple bucks in my pocket, and something, call it fate, call it boredom, made me say, "Fine, give me one." I scratched it right there at the counter, my fingers smudging the silver coating. 3 bells. Then 3 more. My heart stopped. "Mr. Hensley," I whispered, "what's this mean?" He peered over, and his eyes went wide. "Boy," he said, "you just won $1 million." The next few hours were a blur. I called the lottery office, stammering like a fool. They confirmed it, $1 million, tax-free, wired to my account by the end of the week. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my lumpy couch in my tiny apartment, staring at the peeling wallpaper, dreaming of what I'd do. A new car? A trip to Hawaii? But one thought kept bubbling up above the rest: my parents. They'd sacrificed everything for me, Dad working double shifts at the mill, Mom stitching clothes late into the night. They deserved something big. Something like a house. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't just going to give them a gift, I was going to change their lives. They still lived in that cramped, drafty bungalow on Elm Street, the one with the leaky roof and the creaky porch. I'd buy them a real home, a beautiful one, with a garden for Mom and a garage for Dad's old tools. It felt right. It felt noble. I could already see their faces lighting up, tears in their eyes, arms around me. "Jack," they'd say, "you're the best son we could have asked for." That's how it started, simple, pure, full of hope. I had no idea how wrong I was. The money hit my account on Friday, and I felt like a king staring at all those zeros on my bank app. I didn't waste a second. That afternoon, I called a real estate agent named Linda, a chipper woman with a voice like a morning talk show host. $1 million, she said, practically squealing. "Oh, Jack, we'll find something spectacular for your folks." I didn't tell Mom and Dad yet. I wanted it to be a surprise, the kind you see in those feel-good TV specials, big red bow on the door, cameras rolling, everyone crying happy tears. Linda and I spent the weekend driving around town, touring houses. There was a sleek modern place with floor-to-ceiling windows, but it felt too cold. Then a colonial with a wraparound porch, but the yard was tiny. I was starting to lose hope when we pulled up to 17 Maple Lane. It was perfect. A 2-story craftsman, all warm wood and stone, with a wide front lawn and a garden bursting with roses. Inside, sunlight poured through skylights, and the kitchen had a big island where I could picture Mom rolling out dough for her famous cinnamon rolls. The garage was massive, Dad could tinker with his old Chevy to his heart's content. "This is it," I told Linda, my voice shaking with excitement. "This is their dream house." She clapped her hands. "Wonderful. Let's make an offer today, full cash, no haggling. It'll be yours by Monday." I nodded, picturing the moment I'd hand them the keys. I could almost hear Dad's gruff laugh, Mom's soft, "Oh, Jack, you shouldn't have." It was going to be the best day of our lives. That night, I stopped by their place to test the waters. Mom was knitting on the couch, Dad flipping through a car magazine. "Hey," I said, casual as could be, "ever think about moving somewhere nicer?" Mom glanced up, her needles pausing. "This house is fine, Jack. It's home." Dad grunted. "Costs too much to move, son. We're settled." I smiled to myself, thinking, just you wait. Looking back, I should have caught the edge in their voices, the way Mom's lips tightened, the way Dad's eyes didn't meet mine. But I was too wrapped up in my grand plan, too sure I knew what they needed. I left that night humming, the keys to their future practically burning a hole in my imagination. Monday morning, I signed the papers. Linda handed me the keys to 17 Maple Lane, and I swear they felt heavier than they should have, like they carried the weight of every dream I had for Mom and Dad. The house was mine, or rather, theirs, in a matter of hours. Cash offers move fast, and by noon, I was standing in that sunlit kitchen, running my fingers over the granite countertop, imagining Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings. I spent the next day planning the reveal. I bought a giant red bow from a party store, enlisted Linda to help me tie it around the front door, and even hired a photographer to capture the moment. I told Mom and Dad to meet me at a friend's place that evening, keeping it vague. "Wear something nice," I added, grinning into the phone. Mom laughed. "What's this about, Jack?" "You'll see," I said, my chest buzzing with anticipation. When they pulled up in Dad's rattling old pickup, I was waiting on the lawn, the bow gleaming behind me. The photographer hovered nearby, snapping candid shots. Mom stepped out first, her gray hair catching the golden hour light, and Dad followed, squinting at the house. "Whose place is this?" he asked, his voice gruff. I took a deep breath and held up the keys. "Yours," I said. "I won the lottery, $1 million, and I bought you this house. It's all paid for. Welcome home." For a heartbeat, silence hung in the air. Then Mom's face crumpled, not with joy, but with something else. Confusion? Shock? Dad's jaw tightened, and he crossed his arms. "You did what?" he said, low and sharp. I laughed, thinking they just needed a minute to process it. "Come on, come inside. Look at the garden, the garage, everything you've ever wanted." Mom shook her head, her voice trembling. "Jack, we didn't ask for this." Dad stepped forward, his eyes hard. "You should have talked to us first, son." I blinked, my smile faltering. "But, it's a gift. I wanted to surprise you." The photographer clicked away, oblivious to the tension. Linda, sensing trouble, edged toward her car. "I'll, leave you folks to it," she mumbled. Mom and Dad didn't move toward the house. They just stood there, staring at me like I'd done something wrong. I felt a cold prickle up my spine, but I pushed it down. They'd come around. They had to. I stood there on the lawn, keys dangling in my hand, waiting for Mom and Dad to say something, anything, that would match the scene I'd played out in my head 100 times. The photographer finally stopped clicking, muttering an awkward goodbye before scurrying off. The giant red bow fluttered in the breeze, looking more ridiculous by the second. "Jack," Mom said at last, her voice soft but firm, "you can't just decide our lives for us." I stared at her, my mouth dry. "Decide your lives?" "Mom, it's a house. A beautiful house. You've been stuck in that falling-apart bungalow forever. I thought you'd be happy." Dad snorted, kicking at the grass with his scuffed boot. "Happy? You think throwing money at us fixes everything? We raised you better than that." His words stung, sharp and unexpected. Raised me better? I just spent nearly half my winnings to give them something they'd never afford on their own. How was that wrong? "Let's just go inside," I said, forcing a smile. "You'll see how perfect it is." I turned and marched up the steps, unlocking the door with a shaky hand. The house smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I gestured at the hardwood floors, the fireplace, the bay window overlooking the roses. "Look at this. You could retire here, Dad. Mom, you could plant whatever you want." They followed me in, but their steps were slow, reluctant. Mom ran a finger along the kitchen island, her face unreadable. Dad poked his head into the garage, then came back frowning. Too big, he muttered. Too fancy. This ain't us, Jack. I felt my temper flare. What do you mean, this ain't us? You deserve this. I did this for you. Mom's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something cold there, disappointment, maybe even anger. You did this for you, she said quietly. To feel good about yourself. Her words hit like a punch. I opened my mouth to argue, but Dad cut me off. We're going home, he said, turning for the door. You keep your house, son. And just like that, they walked out, leaving me alone in that perfect, empty kitchen, the keys still clenched in my fist. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the house, their house, sitting on the cold kitchen floor, replaying every word Mom and Dad had said. You did this for you. It echoed in my skull, taunting me. Was that true? Had I misread them so badly? By morning, my eyes were gritty, but I'd made up my mind. I wasn't giving up. Not yet. I drove to their bungalow, the keys to 17 Maple Lane jingling in my pocket. The old place looked smaller than ever, the roof sagging like a tired sigh. I knocked, and Mom opened the door, her face tight. Jack, she said, not inviting me in. Dad loomed behind her, arms crossed. I'm sorry, I started, the words tumbling out. I should have asked you first. I got carried away. But please, just give the house a chance. Live there for a week. If you hate it, I'll sell it, and we'll forget this ever happened. I held out the keys, my hand trembling. Please. Mom hesitated, glancing at Dad. He grunted, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. 1 week, he said finally. That's it. Relief flooded me. Thank you, I breathed. You won't regret it. I helped them pack a few things, clothes, Mom's knitting, Dad's toolbox, and drove them back to Maple Lane. They moved in like tenants, not owners, setting their bags down with stiff, polite nods. I tried to lighten the mood. Want me to grill some burgers tonight? Break in the backyard? Mom forced a smile. Maybe tomorrow, Jack. We're tired. I left them there, promising to check in later. Driving home, I felt a flicker of hope. They'd see how great it was, the quiet street, the comfy beds. They'd come around. But that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad, don't come by tomorrow. We need space. My stomach sank. Space? From me? The next day, I couldn't resist. I parked down the street, watching the house like some kind of spy. Mom watered the roses, her movements slow. Dad tinkered in the garage, but his shoulders were hunched. They didn't look happy. They looked trapped. And then I saw it, Dad glancing at the neighbor's pickup, his old truck parked out front. His eyes lingered, wistful. That's when I realized, this wasn't just about the house. I couldn't stay away. Dad's text gnawed at me, we need space, like a splinter I couldn't pull out. By day 3, I was back at Maple Lane, parked down the street again, watching. Mom was in the garden, pruning roses with a pair of shears I'd bought her years ago. Dad's truck hadn't moved from the curb. I told myself they just needed time, but the knot in my gut said otherwise. That afternoon, I caved and knocked on the door. Mom answered, her eyes tired. Jack, we asked for space, she said, but I pushed past her, desperate to fix this. Just hear me out. I'll leave after, I promise. Dad was in the living room, flipping through channels on the big TV I'd had installed. He didn't look up. I know it's a lot, I said, pacing. But this house, it's freedom. No more leaks, no more bills piling up. Why can't you see that? Mom sighed, setting the shears on the counter. It's not about the house, Jack. It's about us. You didn't ask what we wanted. Dad muted the TV, his voice low. We're not charity cases, son. I threw up my hands. Charity? This is love. I wanted to give you something amazing. But their faces didn't soften. If anything, they hardened. That's when I noticed it, a stack of moving boxes in the corner, half-packed. My heart lurched. You're leaving. It's only been 3 days. Dad stood, towering over me. We're going home tomorrow. This place, it's yours, not ours. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Fine, I snapped, my voice cracking. I'll sell it. Forget I ever tried. I stormed out, slamming the door, my chest tight with hurt and anger. But as I reached my car, something caught my eye, a letter sticking out of their mailbox, addressed to Dad in shaky handwriting. Curiosity got the better of me. I glanced back, nobody watching, and slipped it into my pocket. At home, I tore it open. It was from Uncle Ray, Dad's estranged brother. Bill, it read, I'm dying. Cancer. I know we've had our fights, but I need to see you. Please. A phone number followed. My mind raced. Uncle Ray? They hadn't spoken in decades, not since some big falling out nobody talked about. Was this why they were so on edge? I sat on my couch, the letter from Uncle Ray crumpled in my hand, my mind spinning. Dad never talked about his brother, not once in all my 32 years. Growing up, I'd asked about the faded photo on the mantel, 2 boys, grinning, fishing poles in hand. That's nobody, Dad would say, his voice like a slammed door. Mom would just shake her head and change the subject. Now here was Ray, dying, begging to reconnect. And my parents were acting like nothing mattered, not the house, not me. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number from the letter, my pulse hammering. It rang twice before a raspy voice answered. Yeah? Uncle Ray? I said, hesitant. A pause, then a dry laugh. Jack? Little Jackie? How'd you get this number? I swallowed. I found your letter. What's going on with you and Dad? He coughed, long and wet. Old history, kid. Bad blood. I messed up years ago, took something from him he never forgave. Now I'm cashing out, and I just want to make it right. Took what? I pressed, but he dodged. Ask your old man. And tell him I'm sorry, will ya? The line went dead. I couldn't let it go. The next morning, I drove back to Maple Lane, letter in hand. Mom was in the kitchen, packing dishes. Dad was loading boxes into his truck. We need to talk, I said, holding up the letter. Mom froze. Dad's face went dark. Where'd you get that? He growled, snatching it from me. From your mailbox, I admitted. Uncle Ray called me. He's dying, Dad. What happened between you two? Mom stepped between us, her voice sharp. Jack, stop it. This isn't your business. Not my business. I shot back. You're shutting me out over a house, over some secret with Ray, how's that not my business? Dad crumpled the letter and threw it on the counter. You wanna know? Ray stole from me, our parents' savings, everything they left us. Ran off, left me to pick up the pieces. I don't owe him a thing. His voice broke, and I saw something I'd never seen before, tears in his eyes. And I don't need your pity, Jack. Or your money. I stood there, stunned. Mom touched my arm, softer now. We're leaving, Jack. Let us go. They walked out, and I didn't stop them. But as their truck pulled away, I knew this wasn't over, not with Ray, not with us. I watched their truck disappear down Maple Lane, tailpipe coughing smoke, and felt like a kid again, helpless, confused, left behind. The house stood silent behind me, that stupid red bow still hanging on the door like a mocking grin. I'd lost them, not just the house, but them, and I didn't know how to fix it. Uncle Ray's letter was the only thread I had left, so I clung to it like a lifeline. I drove home, replaying Dad's words. Ray stole their parents' savings? That explained the rift, but not why they'd turned on me. Was it pride? Shame? Or something deeper? I poured a coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the crumpled letter. Ray's shaky handwriting begged for forgiveness, but Dad's tears told me he wasn't ready to give it. Maybe I could be the bridge, or maybe I'd just make it worse. The next day, I called Ray again. "Jack," he rasped, sounding weaker. "Didn't expect you back." "I need answers," I said. "Dad told me about the money." "What did you do with it?" A long silence, then a sigh. "Gambling. Lost it all in a week. Biggest mistake of my life. Bill never forgave me, rightly so. I just want to see him before I go." "Where are you?" I asked. He hesitated, then gave me an address, a rundown trailer park 2 hours away. I didn't tell Mom or Dad I was going. Maybe it was reckless, but I needed to understand. The drive was quiet, just me and the hum of the highway, my thoughts churning. When I pulled into the park, Ray's trailer was a rusted box, weeds choking the steps. He opened the door, thin as a ghost, oxygen tubes snaking from his nose. "Jackie," he said, managing a smile. "You look like your dad." Inside, we sat on sagging chairs, and he told me the story, how he'd been the golden boy once, until addiction took over. "Bill was the steady one," he said. "I broke his trust, and he built a wall. I don't blame him." I leaned forward. "Then why is he pushing me away?" "I gave them a house, Ray. They kicked me out of the family for it." Ray's eyes narrowed, sharp despite his frailty. "Kicked you out? That ain't Bill. He's stubborn, sure, but he loves you fierce. Something's off." He coughed, then grabbed my hand. "Take me to him, Jack. I'll fix this, or die trying." I didn't know what to think, but his grip was desperate, and I couldn't say no. We drove back that afternoon, Ray wheezing beside me. When we reached the bungalow, Dad's truck was in the drive. I helped Ray out, my heart pounding. Mom saw us first, her face going white. "Ray," she whispered. Dad stormed out, fists clenched. "What's he doing here?" "Bill," Ray started, but Dad cut him off. "Get off my property." I stepped in. "He's dying, Dad. Just listen." That's when Mom gasped, clutching her chest, and collapsed. Time stopped. Dad dropped to his knees beside her, and Ray swayed, pale. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911, my voice shaking. "Help, please, hurry." The ambulance lights flashed red across the bungalow's faded siding as paramedics swarmed Mom. I stood there, frozen, Ray leaning on me, his breathing ragged. Dad cradled her head, muttering, "Stay with me, Ellen," his voice breaking in a way I'd never heard. They loaded her onto a stretcher, "Heart attack," they said, and sped off. I drove Ray and Dad to the hospital, the silence between us thick as fog. In the waiting room, Dad slumped in a plastic chair, staring at the floor. Ray sat across from him, oxygen tank hissing softly. I paced, my mind a mess. "What happened?" I finally asked. Dad didn't look up. "Stress," he said, flat. "Doctor warned her last year, high blood pressure. She didn't want you worrying." "Stress? From me? The house?" I felt sick. Ray coughed, then spoke. "Bill, I'm sorry. For everything. I came to make peace. Dad's head snapped up, eyes blazing. Peace? You think this fixes it? She's in there because of you, both of you. He jabbed a finger at me, and I flinched. I didn't mean, I started, but he cut me off. You pushed, Jack. Always pushing. Before I could respond, the doctor came out. She's stable, he said. Mild heart attack. She's asking for you. Relief hit me like a wave, but Dad stood, brushing past me to her room. Ray grabbed my arm. Let me talk to him. Alone. I nodded, too shaken to argue. I waited, sipping bitter coffee, until Ray shuffled back, his face grim. He's furious, he said. But there's more. He didn't want you knowing, about me, about them. What? I pressed. Ray hesitated. Your mom, she's been sending me money. For years. To keep me quiet. Quiet about what? I demanded, my voice rising. Ray looked away. Ask them, Jack. It's not my place. The words landed like a brick. Money? Secrets? I stormed to Mom's room, pushing the door open. She lay there, pale but awake, Dad at her side. What's Ray talking about? I said, louder than I meant. What are you hiding? Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad stood, blocking me. Not now, Jack. Yes, now. I shouted. You've shut me out, blamed me, tell me the truth. Mom's voice, weak but firm, cut through. Jack, sit down. We'll tell you. But you won't like it. My legs gave out, and I sank into a chair, heart pounding. Whatever came next, I knew it would change everything. I sat there in Mom's hospital room, the beeping monitors filling the silence as I waited for her to speak. Dad stood by her bed, his hands clenched, avoiding my eyes. The air felt heavy, like it was holding secrets too big to breathe around. Tell me, I said again, softer this time, my voice raw from shouting. Mom reached for my hand, her grip weak but warm. Jack, she started, we never meant to hurt you. She took a shaky breath, and Dad finally looked at me, his face carved with guilt. It's about Ray, he said. And you. My stomach twisted. Me? Mom nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. You're not just our son, Jack. You're Ray's, too. The words hit me like a freight train. I pulled my hand back, staring at them. What are you saying? Dad's voice dropped low. 33 years ago, Ray and your mom, they had an affair. I was away, working the oil rigs. She got pregnant. Ray panicked, took off with my parents' savings to start over. I came home, found out, and I forgave her. We raised you as ours. My head spun. You're not my father. I whispered. Dad flinched. I am, Jack. In every way that matters. Ray's name's not even on the birth certificate. But he came back years later, begging for money, threatening to tell you. We paid him to stay gone. Mom sobbed quietly. We wanted to protect you. You were ours, always ours. I stood, staggering back. Protect me? You lied my whole life. And the house, kicking me out, was that about Ray, too? Dad's jaw tightened. Partly. Seeing you throw money around, acting like you could fix us, it felt like him all over again. We couldn't take it. The room blurred as I processed it. Ray, my real father, dying in a trailer park. Mom and Dad, hiding it with hush money. The lottery win, the house, all my good intentions twisted up in their old wounds. Why now? I asked, voice breaking. Mom wiped her eyes. Ray's dying. He wanted you to know before he went. We couldn't stop him this time. I stumbled out, past Ray in the waiting room, his frail figure hunched over. He looked up, hopeful, but I kept walking. Outside, the night air hit me, cold and sharp. My whole life was a lie, not just the family, but who I thought I was. I'd won $1 million, tried to give them everything, and lost more than I'd ever imagined. Then it hit me, the intrigue that turned my world upside down. In my pocket, crumpled from the chaos, was Ray's letter. I pulled it out, reread the shaky scrawl, "Bill, I'm sorry. Tell Jack the truth, he deserves it." At the bottom, a postscript I'd missed, "The lottery ticket was mine, Jack. I gave it to you that day at the store. You won because of me." I froze. The ticket, the $1 million, wasn't random. Ray had slipped it to me, a final act of redemption. I'd built this mess on his gift, and they'd all known. My real father wasn't just a thief or a ghost. He'd changed my life, and I'd never even thanked him.